interesting topic, relevant topic. I sent you the Diary of a CEO episode with Scott Galloway and what was her name again?
Logan.
Yeah. Logan, who works for
Hinge.
Yeah. Who works for Hinge.
She was a behavioral scientist and worked for Google too.
Right. So pretty credited people.
Yeah.
And it was something that did really, really well. It was an episode that did really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And some fascinating statistics and conversations in there. A lot of the stuff that was in there is stuff that you've kind of spent a lot of your career kind of harping on. And so now is the opportunity that we dive into a lot of that. Why don't we run through some of those key statistics?
That sounds good. So I want to also open up with prefacing that this, for me, this isn't political. It can get very political, this topic. The fact that masculinity is political is an issue. Mm-hmm. It really is. And we saw that with the show Adolescence that had come out. We see it more and more in American Psychological Association, the demonization of young boys, the response to adolescence from the UK Prime Minister. He called it a documentary, for starters, and it's a drama. And said that we need to start having classes for young boys about toxic masculinity. Now, I grew up in a pretty hard environment. I won't speak for you, but we've had chats before. You become what you're told as a child. Think about when even being left at the soccer training and your parents forget to pick you up. That can create at 5, 6, 7 years old an abandonment wound, just something that's accidental. You put boys in a classroom and tell them that they're inherently toxic to support a political narrative. Firstly, it's absolutely disgusting. We should be teaching them how to embrace their traditional male instincts in a healthy environment, not trying to tell them that they're inherently toxic and we need to get it out of them. It's absolutely atrocious. It's so bad. And this is what happens when these movements become political. Believe me, there's toxic femininity, but we don't hear that word very much. We hear misogyny. We don't hear misandry that much. Everything now, even related to being a man, is somehow misogynistic. And I just think I don't agree with it. So I've been talking about a lot of this stuff for a while, but I did want to start off by saying, for my intention with this, it's not to make it political. It's to help men to remember and understand that masculinity is good and how to embrace that and what we're up against. And in fighting an enemy, or I think Nietzsche said it, I can't remember, to fight a monster, we have to make sure we don't become the monster. And so that's the focus that I want to take this in. So it's also not about me saying, see, I told you so, even though I'm going to say that a few times because it's satisfying. But I also want to make it a point that now the mainstream is catching up on what I said a few years ago, that I've had death threats for all kinds of horrible things thrown at me. And so I stand for men, boys, and masculinity and traditional masculinity. And that's what I want to come from today.
Well, with that, let's jump in.
Mm-hmm.
What were probably the key things that really, really stood out for you that you wanted to touch on?
I think there's the main aspect of how confusing it is to be a male these days. We're told to be, and we touched on this in our last podcast, we're told that healthy masculinity is traditional femininity. It's rubbish. It's not. Traditional femininity is for females. That's why they're born that way. Traditional masculinity now is seen as unhealthy masculinity, so stereotypical traits of masculinity are seen as toxic. So it's interesting to note that when we say that traditional masculinity is toxic, the correlation to that must be that inherent femininity is toxic femininity as well. But we're trying to say healthy masculinity is traditional femininity, and that now somehow healthy femininity is women acting like men, which is what we've been going through. I want to talk about that, how to really embrace masculinity in modern society. So we had rites of passage.
Yeah.
Rites of passage worked because we didn't have a war on masculinity. So we're in a different time and we need different tools for different weapons to fight a different war. We're in an internal war, a spiritual internal war of our own consciousness as men, where we're very confused. So I want to touch on that too. And also the elements around this whole George Orwell 1984 doublespeak. For those that don't know what doublespeak is, it's freedom is slavery, war is peace, ignorance is knowledge. Vulnerability is not a strength. It isn't. It means you're wounded. And this doublespeak that's come out is in direct contrast to objective masculinity. Masculinity doesn't change. It doesn't. And you can politicize that and manipulate that through psychology and intellect all you want. The objective traits of masculinity, like being independent, being bold, inability to be manipulated, being strong, stoic, calm, grounded, structured, disciplined, they're objective traits of masculinity. And so I want to speak to the modern masculinity crisis, because there's not actually a modern masculinity crisis. People think masculinity is evolving. I don't believe that it is. I think we've been manipulated to be made to believe that it's evolving, and it's not. And one of the big things in that Diary of a CEO podcast was, now because women don't need men as providers because they can earn their own, then women want men to become more emotional. So they demand this emotional kind of support while not wanting the man to be emotional, because an overly emotional man they get turned off by, and they can't handle the level of emotionalism that the man brings to the woman. This was what Logan mentioned in the podcast. She's a behavioral scientist. I've been saying this for a long time. Women cannot handle a man's emotional trauma. And I spoke to this in a poll that I did, where I asked men if they've been vulnerable with their woman and it's been weaponized, used against them, turned them off, or made them feel unsafe. 97% said yes. It's 160 odd votes. Then I asked the women, have you been with a man that has had an overly emotional response to something? This isn't verbatim, I'm paraphrasing. Where he's been angry, sad, desperate, anxious, fearful, etc., and you've felt unsafe, turned off, wanting to get away, broken up with him. 600 votes, 98% yes. The only kickback I got from it was women telling me that I should take out all of the emotions except crying, which that's just, it's confirmation bias, it's selection bias, and it's manipulation. So those stats proved it. There are studies done with 20 or 30 people that are peer-reviewed and academic. Now, my polls are not peer-reviewed, but I would say that that's a good indicator for what we're up against and what we need clarity on. And it flies in the face of a lot of modern narratives. And I was listening to Robert Greene talk about this, that the more testosterone you have, the less likely you are to be able to be manipulated or bow down to social narratives. You have a strength within yourself to do it. And now, because of dating culture, people can jump to the next person, the next person, the next person, no problem. So men have this scarcity mindset around sex, and so they will bend to the shape of the woman out of fear of losing sex. That's really it. Losing sex, losing companionship. And I believe this is what underpins it all. You know, we're told to be vulnerable, told to be emotional, told to be typically feminine. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't go and process your trauma. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your life being ruled by emotions all the time. And we've spoken about this before, but I feel now there's a bit of validation in this podcast, because most of the stuff I said in that, that I've been saying that was said in that podcast, was accurate. Especially, she used an example of one man that said something around his emotional trauma. His mother committed suicide. An example like that, I can't remember. And the woman said, "Whoa, I'm not here to process your emotional trauma." Yet the women are asking us to be emotionally vulnerable. And this is a real problem. I had it with a really good friend of mine. He told a girl that he'd been speaking to what he'd gone through. She iced him and cut him off. I hear this stuff all the time. I hear vulnerabilities being weaponized against men, used against men, manipulated, turned around, and then the woman gets over it, and then she leaves. So the evidence is there. Now, if you get actually a woman that's in mature feminine psychology, she may be able to sit through it with you. But from what I've seen, no women really want a man to be emotionally dumping on them all the time. And now the evidence speaks to that in the research that Logan did. I don't know how big her sample data was, but I'd say if she'd gone on Diary of a CEO, it's probably big enough to confirm that with the data. And that's what I've been saying for a long time. The hard thing about it is women are going to promote this, but the hard thing is that the men that support this, because they're actually partaking in their own destruction. And part of it is, you know, there's a good quote by Sun Tzu, which is never get in the way of an enemy while he's destroying himself. And that's kind of where I go with that approach. So if a man is overly insulting or overly feminine or aggressive towards me, I don't deal with them. They'll wreck their own situation. So what I want out of this podcast as well is to just maybe inspire men a little to say, you know what, it's okay to be masculine. Because masculine men, we don't worry about what other people are thinking. We just do what we need to do. We just dig in and get it done. And I think there is a movement back to more traditional masculinity in the way that we're born, what our biology dictates.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing the destruction of it. We're seeing the destruction of what happens in society when men roll over and give up. And we're seeing that in a lot of areas.
Think off the back of that, bringing it into what dictates a high value man, like you just touched on then, of, you know, inspiring men to be better, to want to become high value, and what that ultimately creates, because there's a lot of lies in here of what we've been told, and this empowerment of women has come at the cost of men.
Yeah.
And so your mission at the moment is to inspire and empower men to not take control back, but take control of their own lives.
Yep.
And reclaim their own lives. It's probably important to define and understand what that actually looks like.
Yeah, it's a great question, because we hear this term high value man a lot. We don't really hear high value woman a lot, because women's value is kind of inherent and almost at the moment respectfully to a delusional nature that, and I don't like to categorize people into numbers like an 8 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 or whatever, but you see these women on these stupid podcasts, like whatever podcast, not a good thing to watch. So for anyone watching it, that most of that stuff is trash. But you see the women in it. They, you know, there's a guy, Andrew Wilson. He's an excellent debater. I don't agree with everything he says, but he brings in some really great points. And he said, if we can go around the table and ask all the women, you can't say you're a 7 out of 10, what would you be? They all say 8. And there's no 8s at that table. And I don't like to categorize things about that, but it's more to expose the way that these women view themselves versus what a high value man is. So women's value is inherent, you know, men's value is earned. So I heard one woman, and I've mentioned this before, I think when we spoke, Gillian Tajecki, and she's got a massive account, 2 million or 3 million followers, I don't know. Accounts that get to that size that have so much influence become a real problem when a woman like that starts to define a high value man. She's not a man. I can't define what a high value woman is. I don't talk about femininity or how to make a woman more feminine. I don't do that because I respect the feminine. But she's on there saying that a high value man is how emotional he is. And it's just, I get so tired of it because men turn boys into men. Women don't do that. And they can't do it. They can only do it through a feminine lens. And that's okay on some level. But the idea that a woman can turn a boy into a man, it doesn't work. That's why there's more problems with boys now, because 92% of the boys that are in single parent households are raised by the mothers. 80% of teachers are women. 85% of therapists are women. most of our media is through a feminine lens. So the biggest problem with our boys is an over-feminization of them, an absence of masculinity. So to become this quote-unquote high-value man, there's multiple areas which need to be addressed. So in that Diary of a CEO podcast, they talk about women now earning more money than men under 30, which, great. Go do it. I have no issue with equal rights and equal pay. Most people think because I stand for traditional masculinity, I must automatically hate women. And I don't. I love women. I have a beautiful partner that I love very much. I take care of her. I've helped thousands of women. I love women. With the high-value male aspect, we need to help men start to aim for more. And the first thing that they need to do, because women are earning more, is start to become good earners. We want to start switching back into provider roles, because that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to be providers. And income is got to be the first thing that you go and do. Now I cop a little bit of flack for this, and this is one of the brutal truths of being a man. You don't have money in this world, you don't have influence, status, or power. And that, I don't care what anyone says from the American Psychological Association that said masculinity is a disease. I'm not going to listen to a body like that. You have to make money. Money gives you choices. It makes you help people around you. It means you're useful. It means you can commit to yourself, and you have to make money. There's nothing attractive. It's kind of a related correlation. And this is going to get me some flack, but it's just statistics. A single 40-year-old woman that has never been married, that has no children, that has just been out partying, that's not an option that high-value men want to go for. They don't, but women like that think they should have the high-value man while they've been out sleeping around, being promiscuous and doing all of it, unless they've been a nun or celibate or whatever. But I'm talking about the general consensus. Men at 40 and broke are not attractive. Women at 40, generally, for high-value males, they're not going to be an option. They're not going to want to go through that. And that's part of social conditioning. You know, I've gone on dates with women that are in 35, 40. They expect way more and demand way more while wanting to offer less. Whereas the man, when you get into that top 10%, 5%, 1%, you have to make money. So how much money? More than $10,000 a month. 100 to 200,000 a year puts you in the top 10%, just from an income perspective. That means you're committed to yourself. You can have a family. You know, you can take care of a family, and you've done something for yourself. It serves something. Galloway talks about this in the Diary of a CEO podcast. Multiple people talk about it, and it's a reality that we have to confront. It's why is it celebrated when a woman earns more than the man? But if a man says, I got to make money, it's, oh, you're just you're materialistic or whatever it is. It means achievement. It means you've done something. It feels good. You know, I'm super successful. I make a lot of money. And it feels good to be contributing, to be useful. You know, it's nice. In the last couple of months, I've been stopped a couple of times just by strangers on the side of the road. Once was in Tokyo, and people thanking me for my work. And I was with my partner. And do you know how good that feels as a man? Because I'm contributing to society. I'm helping other men. And the people that stop me are generally women and say, thank you for all the work that you do. And I'm in a back street in Tokyo, and a woman from another country comes up with a friend and says, thank you so much for your work. You've influenced me so much. That is such a satisfying experience because I'm with my woman. She's impressed by it. I'm grateful for it. And it means that my work's getting out there around the world. So the more useful you are, the more money that you're going to make. And that needs to be the first thing. The first way we get into the top 10% is through money. Now, the second part is you've got to have some sort of physical attribute. So either be strong, you don't have to be good looking, but it helps, and a martial art. One of those three. Strength is going to make you probably look more attractive. Martial arts is going to make you way more confident. I would say martial arts trumps strength. Until you get older and then injuries stack up and then you want to start building more muscle and going down that path. But, you know, martial arts, you walk differently. You go get to a purple belt plus in jiu-jitsu, you know, 5+ years of boxing, you're going to feel pretty confident. And that's going to resonate through. You walk differently when you have that. So if you have that, plus you make money, you're in a small percentage of men. Then we go to status and influence. Status is really important. Now, you don't want to try to get status for the sake of status. You want status as a byproduct for what you contribute. So that means you want to be a leader or authority in your space. So you want people to come to you for advice on how to do things. You want to be a business owner or a director, recognized as in public through your reputation. You know, social media is important these days. If I didn't need social media for my work, I wouldn't use it. But I do to get the message out there. But you want people to respect your voice. You want to command respect, not because you think that you deserve it, but because you've earned it. That's really important as well. So status. Another thing is women. You want to be able to attract and maintain the attention of high quality women, not women that say they're the best ever. I met a woman in Italy last year, and she said to me, I want a cowboy or whatever fantasy she was living in. She turned out to be one of those late 30s that think she deserves like the absolute be all and end all. And I'm like, look, you're not my woman, definitely not. And she goes, I want, a Southern gentleman that's going to hold the door for me, that's rich, that's this, whatever. I said, cool. So what do you bring to the table for that? And she got so pissed off by it. And I said, that's a question that you need to assess within yourself. Because you've gone through, decades now, close to 2 decades, of sleeping around with whoever will give you attention. This is a real problem. But you think you deserve the top guy when you're not a top woman. You're not a high quality woman. And she didn't like the truth. And part of in fact, I think the most healing thing there is the truth. When you accept the truth. But the truth hurts when you believe your own lies. So she had an image of who she thought she was. And there's an image of who the world represents back to who she is. This goes for men too. Yeah. It goes for both sides. This is just a personal experience that I had. And so you need to understand that when you're looking for women, you have to have standards. You have to know who you are, and you have to be of the volition that I'm choosing a wife. This is really important. I'm not choosing someone to sleep with. I'm not choosing a good time. If you want to do that, you're not my guy. I'm not interested in guys like that if you want to do that. You need to choose a wife. I've been looking for a wife for 4 years. It took me 4 years to go through it to find it. Before I ended up with her, I dated 42 women in a year. That wasn't sleeping with them. That was a coffee date, multiple dates, talking to. So it was everyone. There's 42 women. It was just no. Like continually just moving through different layers of that. Now, that's not to sit there and say, okay, look at me. I dated all these women. Most of them just wanted me for the online presence and the online status. They didn't really want to get to know me. And so you have to understand male and female psychology, emotional dynamics, and have boundaries. And you have to be able to be in a position where you're not manipulated or emasculated in these relationships. I had one woman that I was speaking to for 5 months, and I said that I know my worth in not so many words. And she called me a conceited asshole, while 2 weeks prior to that she said she's in her prime and she knows her worth. And I said, look, that's cool, but you don't get to dictate how I express my worth. And for that, I'm out. I'm not tolerating that. She tried to speak down to me, and, a few other things that came up, which I won't go into. And I said, no, I'm out. I said, I'm not copying that. And she actually said, she goes, I sat on this for a few days, so I didn't come back and be the bitch. And I said to her, I go, if that's you walking away, so you don't come back being a bitch, I'm not sticking around to find out who the bitch is, because you were fucking rude. And you were borderline cruel in the way that the things that you said when you don't know me.
Yeah.
And I don't tolerate that. I'm looking for a woman that wants to have children with me and be my wife. And if this is how you're talking, just from me sitting there saying that I know my worth and what I bring to the table, if you can't handle that, there is no way that I'm entertaining this with you anymore. Absolutely not. She came back crying and saying, oh, please, you can come back anytime. I said, no, man, no way. So you lead with respect for yourself. Men have lost this trait big time. They've completely lost it. You also need, and these are not in order of importance, this list either, but you need mental and emotional mastery. So you can't break under pressure. You can't fold when things get difficult. You have to have a high level of masculine emotional intelligence, which means containment. You have to contain your emotions. You have to be able to read people. You have to adopt an attitude of I'll respond and not react. You have to speak clearly. And you don't let others define you or pull you off course based on public opinion. There's also long-term success over short-term gain. So you have to delay instant gratification, stay focused, and overcome your biases. I had plenty of biases, and I've overcome all of them. So there's that. And a man that's in the top 10%, I'd say this is probably more 1% than 10%, but lifestyle and freedom. You don't trade all of your time for money. You value your time because that's the currency you live to earn later on. You dictate how you live your life. You invest your money in an intelligent way. You walk away things that don't serve your purpose. Even in a voice message, which I hadn't gotten back to yet from you, you said, man, you move fast the other night, where I make decisions and I don't hesitate. I say, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. You know, you're helping me get to a certain number. And when I said that number, your response was, well, I didn't really think about it, but man, you're going for it. And my first thought was, yeah, why would I say that if I wasn't going to get it? You know, but you have to move fast and adapt and say, cool, this doesn't work. This does work. And that's the way that I move through it. And I was talking to my partner, Joelle, about that. And she said, I've seen you work through in 2 weeks what I've seen people try to work through in years and not get there.
Yeah.
And because I sit with it, I strategize, I pull it apart. And this is the way that I think and see the world. And that's a really important tool for men to have, clarity of focus. When I was away with her a few weeks ago, I was ruminating about my business. And that hadn't happened before. And I thought, why am I doing this? Why can't I stop thinking about my business? And it hit me really quickly that I developed almost an anxious attachment to my business. And I said, wow, because I'd had multiple groups going on and this, and I think you got caught up in a little bit of that. So maybe I should do this. And I sort of ran through the multiple elements. And then while I was there, it hit me and I went, oh, okay, right, I've got it. So I cleared out most of the things to focus on only 2.
Yeah.
And all of that started to go away. So you have to be able to self-assess, move through things, take ownership, and address things in a way where you can look at the way you do things and say, yeah, I've got it handled. I'll sort this out. I'm good. My partner's amazing with that. She's, you know, you talk about good women being multipliers. Joelle's a multiplier for me. My income's gone up 70% since we got together, that's a big number to go up by. Yeah. And when you get a good woman, she'll take off your hands the things that you don't need to do. She takes care of the home. She makes me breakfast every morning. She looks after me in those ways that before I was bleeding energy and time managing. And so some people have been a bit funny about the way that I look after her because I pay for everything. I give her money every week. She doesn't pay rent or anything like that. Nothing. She doesn't pay for anything. And people get funny with that. And I say, well, my income's gone up by 70% because of her. Without her, I wouldn't have gotten there. She deserves that. And she should have that anyway. I mean, if she's my partner, that's what's going to happen. So this is really important to have this lifestyle and this freedom because men crave freedom. To be able to dictate how you live on your terms without being shaken by public narrative. Now, as you know, and we've spoken about this a few times, I could take an easier path. You've done almost all of my work. I could sit there and be the guy that works in chronic illness or just helping women through sexual trauma. But this is the path because men are supposed to do hard things, but this is the thing I'm the most passionate about. But I could take an easier path. I could fall into the public narrative and pander to the feminine lens that society wants men to be. And I say, no, that would be me selling out. And so men, if you want to be in the top 10%, you have to adhere to your own value systems. You have to have social intelligence as well, which you have to be able to maintain eye contact, be comfortable in who you are, lead groups, speak with clarity, and command respect in a room. But you don't do that through seeking approval. You give value without looking for validation. That's really important. And character and values, which I've discussed a few times. You set your values and have your standards by what you won't accept. That's really important. And probably the final one is, style and the way that you dress. That says a lot. And people find it funny because I love watches, expensive watches, and I spend a lot of money on the watches. And people find it funny for that. But I know from my experience, I've worked in the investment game and I've had multiple businesses. If someone's rocking up, and this is just my personal preference, and they look shabby, I'll assess that based on that. And they're driving a shitty car or, something like that. Now, this doesn't mean you need to go and do all this just to try to get business. This will be a representation of the way that someone views themselves. Why that's important to me, I remember when I was selecting business partners in London to work with in the investment game, and the guys that rocked up dressed well. One guy had a Rolex, another guy had a Jaeger LeCoultre watch. And I said, okay, these guys are stylish. And they ended up being our business partners, and we made a lot of money through that. But that first instinct for me is someone that takes care of themselves. Are they in shape? Do they dress well? Do they look good? It's not an essential one, but it's one that I think is important. I just spent a few hours yesterday at a tailor getting all my clothes custom made because I like the way certain things fit. It took a few hours and it can be a little bit exhausting by the end of it. I posted it in my stories actually, where I was getting my shirts fitted and all of that. So I can wear the clothes that I want because it makes me feel good. So these tenets are the basics of what you need to get into to be a top 10% man. You need to embody traditional masculinity, but the most important thing that you rarely will get there and be solid there until you go through the individuation process, which is essentially splitting from the mother internally, psychologically, emotionally, and moving into mature masculine psychology. You'll find a lot of the guys that get into that will have done that in some way or another, just not actively. And that's what we used rites of passage for a long time ago, is to split from the mother. But why that doesn't work anymore, where we just go off into men's groups and that works, and we get put through a difficult initiation, is because we're in a different time. And we need different tools to create different weapons to fight a different war. Because back then, there was no war on masculinity. We didn't have most of the Western world attempting to destroy masculinity and turn it into something that it's not. And we have to adapt the same way nature adapts, same way we've adapted. We have to adapt to a new structure to fight the war within. And that is through the individuation process of dismantling internal programming. Because society is a program, and it's programmed young boys that they're toxic, that being overly feminine is the answer, and its relationships are worse than ever. So the evidence is already there.
This is a really interesting one because I speak for myself when I say before having met you, I'd never even heard of this. And I would say that that's probably the case for a lot of people, is this process. And this is something that you've kind of funneled down into being one of, if not the most important part of, call it healing, call it growth for men in particular. How would you describe this process and the stages that it comes in?
Yeah, so it's about becoming whole.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my world, there's the false self, which is all our inherited beliefs, structures internally from the parent. When I say structures, a structure's a piece of identity. So imagine a building, there's multiple floors, there's different offices. It's similar to your identity, but it just goes down a long way and you don't know you're in a building. So it's what we inherit from our teachers, our culture, our society, mainly our mum and dad, what our blueprint is for love. Surprisingly, most people's blueprint for love is going to be around chaos, abuse, betrayal, trauma. That's why we stay loyal to people that we really shouldn't.
Mm.
And the individuation process is to become an individual separated from that. So it's not about external separation. So it's not about exiling your parents. In some cases, that might need to happen, like it did with me. But it's about internal separation from it, psychological separation from it. And I talk about this, and I get some heat for this, because there's a lot in the world of somatics and breathwork and emotional processing. It's all great. I don't have an issue with any of it. You know, traditional therapy for certain people works really well. It's amazing. It can be so great depending on where you're at in your stage of the journey. But when you want to go really into it, psychology is where you need to go.
Mm.
The mental game is where you need to go. It's why you look at champions. None of them deal with somatic work or emotional work. If they do, it's a tiny percentage. I think they might, if they go through a loss and you get the top coaches, they might allow 5 minutes for grieving that loss. They go on to the next one. Kobe Bryant would still, and Tiger Woods, they're back on the court or the course the next day. After they win a major championship at 3 a.m., they're out, he's in the basketball court. Tiger Woods next day might miss one shot a little bit, and then he's on the course the next day after winning the Masters, practicing that shot 500 times. That's a mental game. So we don't listen to our emotions relative to that. So the individuation process is about, it's separating these aspects. And the first is through differentiation. So the differentiation process is, I'm different from my mother and father. This is the first thing we need to establish. I'm different from my culture. And when I'm starting to grow, I'm different from my peers around me. This is where we have to start separating. It's the first part, that you're allowed to be an individual. You're meant to become whole. You're meant to dismantle the false self. It's imperative. This is where we start to define our individuality. Now, some people will fall into defiance, others fall into compliance. So they become exactly who they're told they should be. And others fall into defiance, which is, fuck you, I'll be whoever I want to be. Which is only fighting the thing that you're trying not to become, but then you become the thing you're trying to fight against. Like I said earlier, you know, you have to be careful not to become the monster while fighting the monster.
Yeah.
And so I became in that space like my mother. My mother's very cruel and very aggressive. I wouldn't say I was cruel, but aggressive, yes. Aggressive, lots of street fights, you know, just an aggressive human being when I was younger. And I learned that from her. I just copied it. That's all I did. And I mean, you've known me now for a few years. I'm not an aggressive person anymore. I'm pretty chill. I'm pretty calm. I'm pretty easygoing. Probably more on the stoic side than anything else. And it's interesting with stoicism, it gets a bad rap. But it gets a bad rap only by people that don't really understand it. It's mainly women that give it a bad rap. I would implore men that stoicism should be at the basis of your philosophy of being a man. I would encourage it to get good at the principles in stoicism, which is using logic and reason to override emotions, not getting caught up in emotions, that you make mistakes when you operate from an emotional perspective. If your world is ruled by feelings, and again, it's not about not processing your trauma, do that. Emotions will come in that experience. I've done that. But don't be ruled by feelings because you become unstable. And so this is a really important part. You know, I've heard women say, don't listen to those stoic, strong, masculine accounts. It's like, okay, cool. Those are exactly who you should listen to. If you get a good part of that done, you'll become way more solid as a man. They're the greatest thinkers of our time. There's a reason why 2,000 years later, the philosophy is starting to gain emergence again through books like Daily Stoic, Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Just read those and just watch them have an effect on your life. There's a brilliant quote that's so simple by Marcus Aurelius. And he says, you don't have to let this affect you. It doesn't have to upset you. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And so the differentiation process is about establishing yourself for what is true for you, what's right for you. And that's not moral relativism where every feeling is valid and everyone's got an individual truth. That's where we've gotten into in the world. Aristotle said it, masculine republics give way to feminine democracies. and feminine democracies give way to tyranny.
Mm.
2,000 years ago, that's as true as it ever is today. Look what we've just gone through in the States. That is a feminine democracy giving way to tyranny. And like I said, I don't want to get political. I don't care about politics. I have no interest in them. I'm not this hard right conservative. I'm not an advocate for the left. I couldn't give less than a fuck about politics. I don't get caught up in the game. I think if you're buying into the game, you're still asleep on some level. It's pantomime. It's a show. Give them bread and circus is what they used to say during the Roman Empire. So they'd have the Colosseum and they get away with shit. Give them bread and circus. It's the same bullshit. I don't buy into it. So if anyone tries to pin politics on me, I'm not interested. So differentiation is the first part. The second part is moving into the unconscious, which is facing your internal demons, trauma, mother or father, structures and wounds that are there, and overcoming them and taking responsibility for your life. This is really important because we live in an entitled victim culture. And I've said this many times before that these big accounts are all about meet my needs, meet my needs. There's one with Gillian Tajecki where she said, what did she say? Walking away from someone that won't meet your needs can be the hardest thing you can do. How about you don't get into a relationship with someone that doesn't have the capacity to do that in the first place? And why are you demanding someone meets your needs? Are you an adult or are you a child? The childlike psychology is just rampant in our society. It's a bunch of 20, 30, 40-year-old 4-year-olds that are running around. It's because they haven't been through this process. And accounts like that promote that. It's this overly 3-year-old narcissistic self-obsessed society that we're living in. Not everything needs to offend you. Not every feeling needs to be acted on. Not everyone's a narcissist. Not every diagnosis is an identity. It's time for us to grow up as a society. It's really bad where we're at. So the unconscious work, facing these internal structures is an important part, the blind spots. Then we move into an integration aspect after that. Now, before we go into the integration, the unconscious where I work is through programming. I believe, and what I've seen, is the ego is a collector of programs. That's all it is. And we're unconscious programs, programming unconscious programs. That's parents handing down their shit to their children. And that's an important one to look at because you'll see that you attract in different or the same things, different people with the same circumstances again and again and again. This is the false self trying to be burnt up. This is your inherited self of your parents. That's why you hear, oh, you're just like your father, you're just like your mother. It's because you've inherited this and copied this. So this this unconscious aspect is excavating that to be released. And this is the false self. I had a conversation with someone I met yesterday and she asked me, why do we attract in these really difficult people, psychopaths, narcissists? And I said to start the individuation process, to commence it, because these people, they're false. So they're going to reflect whatever's false within you that you need to burn up. That's why it's so difficult to walk away from them, because all the toxicity, all the intensity, all the significance that you think that it is needs to be broken up within you, because it's like you're separating from a parent. Or if you don't have a parent like that, you're separating from a false sense of self. And it can be incredibly painful to go through that. I've done it and it nearly killed me doing it because I had a lot of stuff going on in my life at the time. And I was splitting from a partner. My father died, a best mate died, and then my godfather died, all in a 6-week period. So I was put through it. And so once we get out of that and we dissolve the programming, we get rid of the internal structures like our mother and father, we then move into integration. This is so the alignment of strengths, the balancing of the tension of opposites, that you can be powerful, but you can be gentle. You know, you can be strong, but you can treat children and, you know, more vulnerable people in a softer way without being soft. You know, you can command respect without speaking. This is the integration. This is the absence of needing validation as well. And values and actions start to align. Now, it doesn't mean that if you set values and standards that you have to live by those for the rest of your life. They will change as you change, but you become more committed to living authentically. And then what happens from that is the merging of the true self. No mask, full congruence. the collapsing of the bridge between the head and the heart, which is the throat, so you're fully self-expressed. There's not much distortion. There's an absence of neurosis. There's no real rumination or being emotionally explosive. There's just solidity. You don't take things personally. You walk through the world settling your accounts in the best way that you can. Conflict goes out of your life. Difficulty is met with, there's a beginning and a middle and an end to this, and it will be over soon. And you meet life with a sense of power but grace at the same time. And this is when your true self emerges. For men, this is where your mature masculine psychology will emerge. And this is generally what I see in this. You'll start to want to have a family. You start to want to get married, have a family, because you'll realize that's the strongest way to move forward. And I believe that for that to happen, you have to go through the individuation first. Otherwise, if you don't split from the mother, you'll attract a woman in and she'll leave you. And you'll have kids and a mortgage and take everything that isn't you, except your kids, so you can go through that process. That's why it feels like death. That's why there's a lot of suicides after a severe breakup. It's the individuation process trying to happen. And so it'll be, you will continue to face these things as a man until you individuate, which is why I started a program to run men through this over a 6 to 12 month period, so this shit stops happening to them, so they don't keep killing themselves, so they have a sense of use and purpose and power and meaning to the way that they show up in life, so they just command respect from their women and their family. They're not begging for it. And that's why this process is so important. So with that, you need to individuate. You should be aiming for the top 10 and then embracing traditional masculinity. You do those three things, man, you are a very rare man in today's society.
So with that process, because there's going to be parts that happen naturally, and that's probably at the back end of the process, because like you speak about with a guy who maybe goes through a breakup, or he loses a parent, or he's forced into that process, and the process kind of comes to him, and it's like you've either got to face it or it will kill you. But then you've got the voluntary, the man who wants to step into it, who knows it's important, who goes, it's not like things are chaotic around me, but I definitely want to get on the other side of this. What is required to start that process for them, to voluntarily step into that process?
Yeah, it's stage one differentiation. So just by wanting to step into it, the differentiation process is the start. But the thing about that, it's about letting things go. It's about removing people, job, elements that are toxic, that are holding you back, beliefs, even partners at the time. I've walked through something with one of my best mates for a year and a half. I was telling him that, and I don't usually tell people to get out of relationships, but I'll say, mate, this woman's bad for you. She's really bad, and she will destroy you if you continue down the path. And he messaged me not long ago, and he said, mate, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, because now he's out of it. You were right the whole time. And so he's been going through his individuation process with resistance to it. He just couldn't see it.
Yeah.
But the voluntary aspect to step in is cutting. It's getting rid of. It's removing. It's creating space for those things to be born. Most people go the other way. They say, okay, I've got this, and this, but what I want to do is get everything first, and then I'm going to replace it. It's the same as if you've got a removalist truck and you've got all the shit you want to get rid of, but then you want to go buy a whole new house full of furniture and then put that in the same truck. You got to either get another truck or get rid of the shit that's in the existing truck before you can fill up the truck with something new. So space is required first and foremost. It will likely be a removal of habits, behaviors, addictions, conflicts being the main one, attachment to parents, proximity to parents as well. You'll see this. Men will go off, or women too, they'll go off and they'll leave. They'll go travel the world, or they'll start to become defined towards their parents. I get a lot of messages about 16 or 17-year-old boys, and the mums are like, oh my God, what do I do, etc. I said, leave him alone. He's trying to separate from you and you don't want to let him.
Mm.
Leave him alone. Even if he's creating a few problems here and there, boys need to learn through difficulty. Mothers at 17 shouldn't be getting involved in the boy's life. The father's more responsible for that. They're trying to individuate. They're trying to separate.
Yeah.
That's more of the involuntary, but the voluntary will usually come when a man's 25, 28. If he's onto it, usually around 30 to 35, there'll be a sense of meaning that's just void in his life. He'll look for something more. He'll want something more. He will have lived a life and say, there's something missing I need, something that my soul wants from me. So it's about the removal. I had to remove friends. I moved to another country when I started this. I lost millions of dollars. I changed careers. I sold everything that I had. My dog died at the same time. The whole bit.
Mm. Mm.
So voluntarily stepping into it is the removal process first. The removing starts to allow the authentic self to emerge a little bit more. Make no mistake, this is a very courageous journey to go on. It is fucking painful and it'll hurt and it will be difficult, but it will be worth it and you will enter a space. I actually believe, even though there's top 10% men with things that can be achieved, if you've individuated really well and done that and sorted yourself out, you're probably in a top 0.1% man, because you will have an authority over yourself internally, which is the true power of the solar masculine. You know, the sun's masculine, luna's feminine, but the solar masculine, where you bring logic and order back into life and into your world. And when you bring that into your life, that's where you become powerful.
Probably one thing that I think a lot of men will relate to, and you touched on it briefly before speaking about your own story, is vices. And big part of this process that I'm hearing from you is, you know, the process of removal, and part of that being removing these vices and these grips. Another thing I hear you say is how this is a mental game.
Yeah.
This is a mind game. And so these vices that grip men, it can seem as though, and we've spoken about this before, the Alex Hormozy approach, just stop.
Just change the behavior.
Or just change the behavior. So speaking specifically to vices, addictions, you know, drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, how does a man begin to remove that vice or regain control and remove that from his life?
Yeah, so, I mean, even in the question, it's removing it. It's not about removing the vice. It's about dealing with the internal conflict that drives you to use the vice. So drugs, as an example, people usually that are seeking drugs are just seeking internal connection. So there's a disconnection there. So what element of the disconnection are you trying to resolve through the drugs and the escapism that lowers the barriers into presence? So it may be, we look at some of the addictions, drugs are usually based on a sense of deprivation. Usually, 99% of the time. Sometimes it can be an aspect of rejection, but that's rare. Deprivation is an addiction. This is where a binge and purge cycle comes in. So I'm going to binge, I'm going to go out and eat, sleep around, take drugs, and then I'm going to purge through the hangover experience after that. And deprivation is based on an emptiness, and we want to feel full. And so it creates a drive to obtain through craving. And then I'm going to get what I think that I want, which might be the fullness of drugs or the present moment through the feeling of love, because drugs essentially inspire a feeling of love within you. But then that's going to withdraw. And then that hole is going to be there still. That emptiness is going to be there. And that emptiness is a felt sense of loneliness, which is driven through being invisible. If I'm invisible, I've got no full state. And so as a child, I will have not been seen or not being heard. So it's like I'm invisible. So when I didn't get the love that I wanted as a child, I'm going to seek that in some unhealthy, maladaptive way later on, where I'm in quote unquote control of that. And that's going to be in a program based in I don't matter. So how can I influence the world of matter if I feel invisible and thus not actually made up of any matter? Because the only thing I'm in a relationship with is I don't matter.
Mm.
And then in order to be right about that, to counter that, I'm going to go feel full to counter the emptiness and the loneliness by taking drugs. But loneliness, and I've mentioned this before, my interpretation of loneliness is it doesn't actually exist. I think from what I've seen is that it's just an absence of authenticity. As you go through the individuation process and you dissolve this, and this is what I do in my work, I dissolve these conflicts for people and collapse the prison that they're in and free them from the prison. You know, the psychological conflicts are criticism, control, deprivation, denial, being unloved, being rejected, being abandoned, being betrayed, humiliated, and victimized. They're the 10 addictions that we experience. Sure, substances are the byproduct to escape those, but they only reinforce them. It's why when we have, say, an abandonment wound, that's housed in a prison of I'm not wanted. So then what do? I bring in people that leave me because I keep abandoning myself so they don't abandon me. Because the part of me that isn't wanted, I don't want the part of me that's not wanted. But then I have to experience the feeling of not being wanted to expose that. But then I make it about someone else. So I had a woman recently wanting to do a course that I run, and she was very caught up with this healing her masculine wound, saying, I need more info, I need more info, I need more info. And I simply said to her, I said, you are exacerbating your quote-unquote masculine wound by not trusting me that this will work for you. You're saying you want this, I need to know it's going to do this. I want to call in a relationship, and she's talking like this, and it's really fast, and it's really intense. And I said, you need to fix the relationship with yourself, because you'll keep bringing men in that will leave you because you don't trust them, because you didn't trust your father. And you're projecting that now onto me, that you won't trust the fact that what I'm telling you is true until you disprove it for yourself and go, I'm right again. And I said, I'll do you a favor. I'll send you my relationship course for free as well. And I'll give you the other course. And I did that. I sent the relationship course after she'd already bought the dynamite course. But I said, I did this so you can start to trust me. So you can start to trust that men have your best interests at heart, because you don't think that they do. And that's what happens. And so when we're trying to overcome these conflicts, we look for peace to absolve us of the conflict, and that's what the drugs do. But then the withdrawal, or the sex, or the food, whatever. Food's the biggest drug on the planet. How do we feel afterwards? We feel shit. And so food is we're overfed but undernourished emotionally, and we're using food as a way to try to counter that. Hence the feeling full. I'm full. But we look at the most satisfying form of being full, it's being fulfilled through authenticity. When I'm whole, WHOLE, I feel full because my expression is met with the world and reflected back through my authenticity. Authenticity, I believe now, has the highest vibrational state. It's higher than love. And I've said this before, authenticity is the true social currency. The difference is men have been convinced that vulnerability is authenticity, and it's not. Traditional masculinity is authenticity. And being solid, powerful, disciplined, structured, direct, context independent, bold, dominant as well. Not by domineering others, that's ruling by fear, but dominant by leading by inspiration. Whenever I'm working with a business owner, I teach them lead by inspiration, don't rule by fear. One's dominant, one's domineering. And nature operates in hierarchy. It doesn't matter which way we want to try to create a flat structure, there will always be hierarchy. I didn't write the rules of nature, I just play the game and I accept the rules. I don't try to deny the rules. Masculinity is not subjective to be based in moral relativism. It is objective, and it has a set of principles that it lives by, and that's what I want to get men back to.
If we were to continue on the trajectory that we're on, which is not a good trajectory, it's clearly one that has been destructive and unproductive and damaging. Like, if we don't fix this, and we don't change something, what do you believe is at stake?
Chaos. The future of boys' sanity and emotional health is at stake, and their psyches are at stake, and our society is at stake. And I think we need to reject the weakness culture. We really do. I was in Sydney City yesterday, and I was at a restaurant with my partner, and I said, let's play a game to see how many solid masculine men we can spot. And we didn't see anyone.
Mm.
You know, guys that walk in a way with their shoulders back, their head up, they look strong, they've got a solid gaze, they're not overweight with long hair and a man bun, you know, that don't care about their appearance. And there were none around. There were none around. And it was eye-opening to me, because modern society encourages men to be soft, to be passive, and to be emotionally indulgent. We're in that phase now, being emotionally indulgent, and that kills masculinity. And part of that is to tell the truth without apology and call men to duty, honor, and sacrifice. That's a big thing. If we lose, and I don't think we can lose it, the family structure, which is why there's an all-out assault on it. And I think that it's a cornerstone of society. My partner and I actually did a pregnancy test yesterday, and unfortunately weren't pregnant. And we were both really disappointed in that. And we want to have a family, you know, and that's been pulled out of me in such a strong way that I saw another reel by a woman, Bernadine Bluntly, I think it is. She's pretty cool. She's a bit more in the Christian world for women, but promotes feminine traditional roles. And it said in she asked Grok a series of questions, why do men cheat? And the answer was variety. And I was talking to Joel about that, and I said, when you've had enough variety becomes pretty boring. You want more than that. And variety would usually only be to some of the men that don't get it. But after a while, when you've run through all that and you've lived that part of your life, it becomes boring. And there's a promotion of this through multiple wives and the Andrew Tate ideology, and saying if you don't want multiple women, you've got low testosterone. I think low testosterone, I don't agree with that. You know, I've been that guy before, and as I've gotten older and wiser, I do believe the restoration of the patriarchal role, now that word's controversial, and I'm talking about it not from a societal structure of oppressing women, but just the man leading. All it means is led by the father. That's it, and that's what I'm referring to in this. And the fact I even have to preface that is symptomatic of our society. But I think you'll want to commit, you'll want to take care of a family, you'll want to embrace a family. And I think that is where we need to make a return to. I don't really think that we need to look at what happens, because it's already happening. We are in weak men create hard times. We're in it right now. We're knee deep in our own bullshit for letting this happen. And it's men's fault. It's men's fault. When men behave badly, everyone behaves badly. I saw a statistic the other day. There's 12 million females aged 18 to 24 in the States. I could be wrong. I saw this online. Okay, so I'm going to say I haven't checked the stats yet. Didn't have time to do it, but correct me if I'm wrong. And said there's 12 million girls aged between 18 to 24. 1.2 million of them are on OnlyFans. That's 10% of that generation. OnlyFans is not that old.
Mm.
In America, there's 162 million men, and 82 million men have a OnlyFans subscription. That's disgusting.
Mm.
Men should talk about removal. Remove that. We're in the crisis already. Yeah. It's here. We're in it, and it needs to start changing. So I do believe that the return of the patriarchal role as the family structure, very important for people listening, that their head's about to explode if you're a woman. I'm not talking from a societal aspect. I'm talking about from a family aspect. So the natural family structure is one where the man leads, protects, and provides. It's not about domination. It's about order. There's a reason why patriarchy has been associated with domineering and oppression and control. And there's been elements of that a while back that are accurate. I don't believe in that. That's control. That's tyranny. That's not true patriarchy. So we promote fatherhood, not just biologically, but spiritually. We protect men's roles in the home from being diminished or erased, and stop diminishing and erasing the importance of motherhood. C.S. Lewis said it the best, said all roles in the world exist to support the one most important role, that's the homemaker, meaning the mother, to raise the children. And I think a balance of that comes back. And rather than going the other way from patriarchy to matriarchy, synarchy is the combination of the two, where we're naturally in balance. You know, I protect and provide. Joelle, my partner, is the nurturer and the carer. She fills that role so well. She's incredible at it. Why? Because she's a very feminine woman. I fill the role of the protector and provider because that's what my biology dictates. And I think we need to get back to that. And so going through this, because the crisis is already there, we also need to look at that masculinity isn't fluid or changing. It doesn't change. It's like the gender ideology. These are the people that convince themselves that they're a cat, you know, or whatever they want to believe. And that's, if they want to live like that, okay. If you're an adult and that's how you want to live, go fill your boots and do that. I have no hate towards you, nothing. It's okay, go do that. You're not who I'm talking to here. But it's typically not those people specifically, but people that have similar ideologies that believe masculinity is something we can mold and subjectively change. We can't. It's not fluid and it's not changing. It's not some moral relativistic aspect that we can take on. It's defined by traits that have been consistent across time and culture. It's only changed in the last 20 years, or tried to change in the last 20 years. It's about strength and discipline and leadership and provision and honor and courage and protectiveness and responsibility and containment, emotional control. And it's objective and it's fixed. And through that, we need to make sure that we preserve rites of passage and male initiation from a younger age, splitting from the mother. Because modern culture lacks structured initiation into manhood. It's, you got to be like a little girl in order to be a solid young man. And we become that through challenge, risk, responsibility, and proving ourselves. So why I bring it back to the number one thing you should do is go and be successful and make money. You proved yourself. It proves yourself. You prove to yourself and you prove to others. So military, martial arts, mentorship, spiritual disciplines, men have to be forged, not coddled. The devouring mother destroys masculinity. We live in a collective devouring mother. We don't live in a patriarchy. We don't. We live in a collective devouring mother. And we have to reinforce order. And true masculinity respects and thrives in hierarchy, where we earn our place. It's not through domination, it's through earning it. And today's flattening of roles and confusion of authority undermines this. It undermines it. And so we have to encourage masculine leadership in the family, in our communities, in our church, in our schools, and teach men to take charge of themselves first, and then not taking charge of others, but walking in a direction that others feel inspired to follow through reliably good action, making a good call. This is why I'm so successful, because my results dictate that. People ask me a lot, what are your credentials, whatever. I'm like, fucking life and 7,000 people with results. I don't care about a university. Most universities are woke anyway these days. Because I wanted to do clinical psychology, but I'm not going to be part of a body that tells me that my inherent masculine biology is a disease. Fuck that. I'm not going to be part of that. I'll forge my own path to do it. And that's not to say that modern psychology doesn't have a place and it can help a lot of people. It does. I've used it before. I've worked with therapists before to overcome what I grew through. But I'm in the position that I'm in, not because I adhered to social norms or narratives, is because I forged my own path. And this is also where boys and men need to build sovereignty and self-mastery. And a man who can't control himself is a slave to his impulses, emotional vices, addictions, you name it. And masculinity requires discipline over the body, over the mind, over the emotions, and the desires.
Mm.
So we can look at part of that through physical training, stoic practice, delayed gratification, fight comfort is a good one, and embracing hardship. We were talking about this earlier today. It is fucking hard to be successful.
Mm.
Not only is it hard to get successful, it's even harder to maintain success because you have to be so adaptable and on point. Back to the voice message, you said, man, you just move quickly, because I've learned that. And I hope that inspires you in some way as well.
Mm.
Because I adapt and I change. I go this way, this is where we're going. It's almost like a military strategy where there isn't much time for me to burn off figuring things out, where people would rather stick with something that doesn't work for a year rather than cutting it after a month.
Yeah.
And that's a really important aspect. So rather than look at where is this heading, because where it's heading, we're already in. The future is now relative to this. But how do we find our way out of this mess? Because hard times are coming. We're in hard times now, but man, harder times are coming. And so I can't sit around and wait for the hard times to hit. And I want to raise young boys to become better fathers and better husbands later on, and restore this back to its natural role. Because we're in the world of nurture at the moment, and it's fucked up society. So now we've got to get back to more of a balanced society and bring order back. Because make no mistake, like I said, we're in a devouring mother. Our society wants to destroy masculinity. It will do everything it can to destroy masculinity. And then it will be sitting there dealing with its own mess. And I can't sit by and watch that happen. Not when I've probably a year away from children coming through. If I have a daughter, I want to set an amazing example for the man that she should choose. And if I have a son, or maybe both, I want him to grow up and be a solid example of what a man is. And that's important to me. And what I'm seeing at the moment, we're like a dying breed. But we can't go extinct, because nature will always sort itself out and balance back out.
So talk to me about this journey that you are now about to take men on.
Yeah. I was just about to step out of the masculinity space again. And it's like the Godfather movie, you know, just as I try to get out, they pull me back in. And it's something that's really important to me. And I needed to reassess the direction I was going to take it. There's a lot of masculinity accounts out there. There's Christian masculinity. There's, you know, stoic masculinity, all that. There's nothing really that original out there. And I looked at my own journey and I said, what do I need to bring to the world? What do I need to help men with? One thing I need to help men with is through the abuse and manipulation from women. There's a real epidemic of that, and women aren't really held to account. They're really not. And I'm not saying that there's been awful things that have happened to them in the past. And I had a woman send this to me. She said, you know, I'm not a feminist, but I read this book by someone, I can't remember what her name was. It was about the witch burning. And I said, cool. Did that happen in this generation? She said no. And I said, okay, would you blame a 10-year-old German boy for what Hitler did? She says no. And I said, respectfully, get over it. Our generation is not in 500, 600, 1,000 years ago. We need to at some point get over it and move on from things instead of banging the drum of victimhood. Now, on that, I did just say that what I want to help men with is the abuse and manipulation from women. This is part of it, is using things that haven't been part of our generation to make men the bad guy. That's virtue signaling. You could say compassionate, vulnerable narcissism as well. and to help men to remember who they are. So this group is for that, to give men a space to actually go, yeah, man, that fucked me up. I've suffered way more at the hands of women than I ever have from men. My mother being the first one, which gave me a fantastic initiation into this world, and then an ex who turned out to be an amazing gift in my life. And I want men to be able to have a space where to confront the reality that this happens. This absolutely happens. I think I saw a statistic of paternity tests in America that were tested. 40% came back that the father wasn't the father the woman said they were. The biggest abusers of children on this planet are mothers. That's childwelfare.org for those that want to check it, and Wikipedia. 2018 data from the National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System, NCANDS, indicated that 77% of perpetrators were parents. 40% of the victims were abused and neglected by the mothers acting alone. 21.5% were abused and neglected by the fathers acting alone. So almost twice as many were the mothers. Now, it even says in this that they believe that the experts suggest that female perpetrators are under-recognized due to factors of biases that associate abuse primarily with the male perpetrators. So that number's probably higher. I'm not saying that it is. But we don't talk about these things. I said this to a woman once, and she goes, yeah, but men sexually abuse women more. And I said, don't deflect from the point. Yes, that is true. But I'd also love to get actual statistics of women that have done it to men. It happened to me. It's happened to me multiple times, where a woman's tried to force their way onto me. And I've said no multiple times. And I said to them, if that was me doing that to you, I could be arrested. Now, neither side is okay. Abuse by anyone is not okay. Abuse by a man or a woman, I'm not promoting any of that. But these statistics what create a lot of controversy. And I want to be able to create a space for men where we can work through that abuse and move through it and let men actually be acknowledged for what happened. I've got good mates that have had children and the women have run off with the children, and there's no recompense for that. There's no recourse for that. They just walk away. That's fine. More and more of this is coming out now as well, which is going to be interesting to see how it goes. You know, I would say that in a previous relationship that it was a high level of abuse that I experienced. I didn't know it was psychological and emotional. I didn't report that. And I know from working with thousands of men, they've experienced it. My friend that I was just talking about before, I stood by him for a year and a half. I watched his woman abuse him psychologically and emotionally. And she was at a very high level, similar to the woman that I was with before. This happens way more often. There's underreporting on both sides. This is why I want to create better men, because good men don't abuse women. And good women don't abuse men. So work's required on both sides. I'm just on one side of it. And so walking men through that to help them overcome that. And then I'll work in the programming world to dissolve that, to dissolve the addictions that they're in as to why they attracted that in, help to differentiate them, get into the unconscious work, help them through integration. Then what we do is we start to play the game after that. We dismantle, dissolve, and destroy the false self. Then we start to designing them into a top 10% man and getting them into that top 10% space where abuse won't happen. It's the same with women. I'd love to have a female counterpart that did this work so she could create amazing women that don't abuse men. I want to create men that don't abuse women. I would love a female counterpart to do the work with so that wouldn't happen on either side anymore. It's not okay on either side. It's absolutely not. And I'm not a woman, so I don't feel I have the right or I've earned that to walk women through that process. I've worked with women to dissolve trauma and aspects of mental limitation, but not through an individuation process. That's not my role. So I think it's important that we go through this where it's differentiation, unconscious addressing, integration, authenticity. You know, you'll be in that group and you'll see me walk people through that. Working with men one-on-one, So it'll be 1 week where I do the work, teaching elements. Week 2 will be sharing. Week 3, teaching, working one-on-one. And people will heal and move through their individuation just by watching. So they don't need to actually actively participate because it'll apply to all men. And then once we get into a few months, I don't know how long it's going to take, then we start to design our top 10% life. Because as a man, you should fucking want to be in the top 10%. If you're not, you're probably not my guy. And that's cool. But you should, man. You should want to be exceptional. You should want to be elite. You should want to be excellent. You should want to be in that top 10% as a man. You get into the top 10%, what's your life change? You'll live a good life. Suicide will stop. Families will become healthier. Women will become safer, will feel safer. Women will become, they'll thrive. Men will thrive. Families will thrive. Then as a result, society will thrive. There'll be people that you just can't help, that you can't work with, and, you know, that are too far gone. And that's okay. I'm not here to help everyone on the planet. But the main thing about the group, and this is the most important part, is network is a part of being a top 10% man. So I want to get these 40 or 50 men and make the group a top 10% network. And then we bring other people in, and that's the game.
And how do people jump in?
DM me, Instagram. I'm at 25. I think I'm at 25 already at the moment. I started with 25, but I'm going to up that to probably 30, 35. I'd like to get to 50, but I don't want to hit that 50 straight away. I kind of want to do that within a few months and just keep building to see the capacity of what the group can handle. And then what I want to do is I'm hoping to, by the end of 12 months together, start training men how to do groups like this. That's really the goal, is to, you know me, I train coaches and I train therapists and psychologists. But what I want to do is I really want to train men to run men through this. That's the end goal.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. And create all top 10% men while we're at it. It's at that point, it's who you know. And so what an amazing journey. And I feel really lucky. I was talking to a guy that is joining this. I had a coffee with him the other day. And I said, this group is going to become a top 10% network. He's like, fuck, man, no one's doing this. I said, yeah, they're either just going, change your behavior, you know, or act masculine. The individuation process is what underpins all of that. Through dismantling and dissolving of programs, authentic self emerges. Then we start to act with purpose and meaning and clarity in the world. We have direction. We all become top 10% men. Or the men in the group all become top 10% if they're not close to that already. Then we've got a network of top 10% men. That's a good thing.
Yeah.